Good afternoon, everybody. Still see people arriving. Please take your seats. We are now finally about to start. I apologize for the slight delay. As you may know, we had the annual general meeting of the INAM Association today, just before this public event. And we've got some exciting news about that to tell you, but also that led us to have a bit of a delay. But I'm super happy and I'm super glad to see so many people. I think this is the first time we have an audience of, let me just guess, above 80 after Corona. We were spoiled with audiences like that before Corona, but even for us also, Corona did have a massive impact on our event attendance. My name is Oliver Hasser. I'm Managing Director of INAM, the Innovation Network Advanced Materials, and I have the great pleasure to guide you through evening, or at least the next 1.5 to 2 hours. We have an exciting program today with a panel discussion. We have exciting startups from our ecosystem that will present. And then at the end of the official event, we also have the opportunity to network over a little bit of food, for thought, of course, but also for the stomach, and some drinks. We come to what INAM does and what precisely it is in a second. Let me start with the topic of the evening. Innovating in challenging times. And I think we do have challenging times at the moment indeed, in all kinds of respects, many challenges on the horizon. The phrase of the VUCA world has come to many articles in the strategy literature. But I don't want to focus so much on the geopolitical things. I want to focus on the topic which is most at the heart of INAM, which is advanced materials, innovation, startups. What we've seen, and what you are going to see in a second, hopefully, and this is particularly for the startups, of course, of concern, a dramatic drop in funding, 2021 compared to 2022. In Germany, more than 40% in venture capital was not dispersed in comparison to 2021. This, of course, impacted many startups. And a short side note, INAM was able to benefit a bit from that also, because we at the moment are happy to have an office in what was formerly the headquarters of Gorillas, but this is just a side note. But if we look at it from a, let's say, long-term perspective, we do see that actually the statistical outlier is not 2022, it's 2021, with lots of cash in the market, with super high valuations, particularly for digital startups coming up, and many big rounds actually being invested. If we look at the trends that is coming over the years, over the last 7 years, it's continually more or less increasing. And I think that is not only a hope, that's actually good news. Startup funding is growing and growing and growing in Germany. And we see that in the number of funds that are newly set up. We see that also in the number of business angels that are engaged in early stage startups. And of course, we see that also in the number of companies being founded and living on. And this, of course, shows a differentiated picture. And we see how much it depends on the sector you're in. And I hope that is legible even towards the end of the room, but I comment upon this graph a bit, so maybe that helps in understanding it. So as we've heard, and as I've mentioned already, the big drop in funding really happened in the overvalued, one could even say, asset classes of digital, of fintech, of e-commerce, etc., etc. And if I look at our little space here, hardware, just see a tiny drop, which I think is fantastic. And what I hear from our startups, they haven't really felt a big dent. And that goes those at the beginning of their lives, as well as those that go for their Series A. From that perspective, the world does not seem to be as grim. And we could even perhaps say investments as well as valuations are readjusting to a more sane world where the material world, not only in the advanced material sense, the material world is gaining again more importance, even though it is a difficult, used to be difficult class from a number of perspectives. Now let's come to what's INAM. INAM is an association founded now roughly 7 years ago in Berlin, to basically support innovations coming from the material, advanced materials, and high-tech hardware world. And what we've done over those years, not me personally, I've joined INAM, as mentioned, directly in 2021, but my predecessors and board and everybody else that is involved is build up a massive international ecosystem that can actually lend support startups to innovators to companies that otherwise might have severe difficulties to bring their product to the market. So as we stand, we're actually 22 members now, 22 corporate investor and research members that support core operations of INAM. We have 77 startup members. They also not only contribute in terms of finance, scale, but they contribute to the life of the association by their insights, their experiences, by their growth, their product, to our startups that are new to them. Only as members, 2,000 startups in our ecosystem. Switch. Sourcing. Also, we have growing from, I've heard, I think, one person in 2017 that run the operations of. I would like everybody to just briefly come forward, because oftentimes not everybody is being seen. So there's Taha taking care of our marketing and scouting efforts. There's Chris, who's taking care of our finances as well as admin programs. Should be Tom, Asa, and Ruslan. Tom is working and Asa on our AtmaLab incubation program. These two guys are at IRIS in Adlershof and help the startups in the lab to do the testing, etc., etc. And I don't know where Asa is, but she should be here. And finally, we also have one more point. We have super volunteers from our membership, but also beyond our membership that support us. And as a representative, I would like to call forward Stefan Gall, who's also working with the startups in the IRIS lab. And even though he's not an official team member of INAM, it feels like he is one. Super. So this is INAM, and these guys do great things. In particular, we run our 3 startup programs. We have the Advanced Materials Lab that is basically supporting startups from the very start, i.e. pre-funding. We support them over a year with And that's awesome. So you tell them about AtmaLab.
Yeah, all I can say is that I'm really happy that I was part of AtmaLab to start AtmaLab. I keep telling people AtmaLab is designed by an entrepreneur for entrepreneurs. I hope they had a good time if they are here. And we had a great team as well, great support from Iris. It's been fun, and let's see how it goes.
So our 3 programs basically cater from pre-founding. AtmaLab is giving grants or stipends to founders, help them with lab access, help them with all kinds of knowledge that they need to have to build up the companies, to finally and hopefully get on the investment track. Our classic product, one could say, is the Advanced Materials Competition that has been running since 2016. And that is an acceleration program targeting startups which are around industry pilot, or put it differently or more technologically, TRL 4 to 6. It used to be a 2 weeks on the ground Berlin program, but is, let's say, thanks to Corona, been converted into a hybrid program with 1 week on the ground. The next one is starting in May. Maybe Chris, you want to comment upon that?
Oh yes, thank you, Oliver. Yeah, we've got our next hybrid program coming up in May. It's going to be over 3 weeks. And the first 2 weeks are going to be, well, it features a lot of mentoring sessions with our experts from the network, and training sessions for startups to help get their pitches. There's pitch trainings and things like that to really help bring startups along on their journey to that next level where they can begin to pitch and convincingly attract industrial partners. And the first 2 weeks will be online and remote. And the last week will be in Berlin. So we're going to have all the startups from all over the world. We normally pick between 10 and 12 to come and join the program. And in Berlin week, they all come to Berlin and they meet the network in person, and it culminates at the end with the demo day, which is on the 25th of May at TU 1 out at Schröder. So yeah, keep that in mind. And if you're a startup in the audience and you're interested to apply, please, we're taking applications, so come and talk to me afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we have Applicant Scale, which is taking place in October this year. That's for those startups that are getting ready for Series A. The modus operandi is pretty similar, apart from the fact that it's stretched over 4 weeks with 3 weeks of hybrid trainings and mentoring, and again, 1 week in Berlin, with the demo day being on the 26th of October at a venue yet to be decided. Great, fantastic. So big cheers to the INAM team. Thanks, guys, for all your contributions and make INAM what it is. But there's also other people that contribute and that are closely associated to INAM, and that is the board that is working on the strategy, that is pushing the association into the right direction by making the right connections. And as I said before, we've had our elections, board elections, just before this meeting. And I'm super happy to ask on stage at least most of the board members. 2 have been joining online, so they cannot be here with us today. But I would like to ask forward Marcin, Garrett, Sven, Tatjana, and who else? And Mary. There we go. So the board is elected for 3 years. So these guys will be responsible for building the next phase of INAM. And it has transpired already. They've very quickly, they seem to have a good working mode, because just after being elected, they allocated the internal tasks, i.e. determined the Ablauf, as you would say in German. And it has transpired already that Marcin is the chairman of the board, following Ferdinand, who is sitting somewhere there and who's been the chairman of the board for the last 6 years. And I think that deserves a massive cheer. Okay. Yeah, then I hand over to Martin and tell us a bit about himself and the plans.
So thank you so much. I think I need to take a huge heritage, right? So for those who don't know Ferdinand, he actually helped build up this network to the point where it is, right? So the vision that we had in the past was to really help startups to get out of science to the market. And that's a tough way. If you're online, if you do hardware, if you don't do software, but really like tough things from science, you will not find many resources that will help you. Most of them, they will guide you in the wrong direction. And you will need, access to infrastructure, which we have, made possible with our AdmaLab program. You will need access, to know-how, which we have in this network. And you will need access to understand once you get to the scaling point, how you can scale that, right? And I think this network is unique and one of a kind because it tries to provide all that. It's not a loud network like you have, all these Hello Tomorrows and this big conference all around the world where you go to celebrate, have fun and network. It's a network that's really useful. And so what we try to do. And I think what we want to do next is we try to build on that. Right? So we try to help startups to get from prototype to customer and bridge the gap. How can they be financed well? Right? Because that's a big problem for hardware startups. It's not as easy that you just put 10 monkeys in front of a computer and they try to type, right? And they do some marketing budget and stuff like this. We need to have real things, real physical things. They need to produce, they need to be out on the market. There's reliability, responsibility behind that. It goes far beyond software. And to get there, I think we need to also make startups and companies understand that this is serious business. Right? It's not we meet together, we drink our soy latte, and it's all fun at startups. No, it's not like that. So I've been doing my company for now 12 years. And I learned it the hard way. Right? We never received VC funding. I think for the first VC money, I was fighting for 6 years to get. It was all made, grassroots, and then all made with business angels, people that we have in this network here, before we were ready for VC, and we're still not ready for VC. Right? And I think we want to get this network to be very useful, to help, and of course to understand how we can, get all these things together. And we have big corporate members here that, understand, their own pains that we have, and I think startups can solve that. But in order to make that work again, we need to make sure that startups understand that their solution needs to be really plug and play. For hardware, it's tough, right? And I think that's the goal. So we try to focus more on the end game. So pushing the startups out of, let's say, the scale and, making sure they're ready for that. Because the rest, the team and the members are making really good jobs so far to get this done. And the next 3 years is, to build up. So thank you so much.
Okay, my name is Sven Schilf. I'm a lawyer, the law firm Greengate Partners. I'm specialized in IP and international commercial law. And for more than 15 years now, I support startups in the internationalization. Yeah, I fully agree with what has been said by Martin on the practical aspect of INAM. A network like this needs to be useful, and we want to give pragmatic advice, support, and on the long run, maybe even financing. Yeah, that's it.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Friedlander. I'm from Israel, Tel Aviv. I'm working for Continental, responsible on the partnership and investments in the Israeli startup ecosystem, and responsible on the material side of Continental globally, Continental and Tires divisions. My job is basically to connect startups, early stage startups to the corporate, scale together and develop together common projects, common products. And I'm looking forward to support and contribute to the INAM network as well as part of my responsibility. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tatiana Königsmann. I'm part of the R&D for the company Atotech. They're based in Berlin, but they're worldwide. And we are acquired by MKS. So now we are a really big team. And we are really looking for new startups, new technologies, challenges, as materials.
So hello everyone, last in line, physical presence. I'm Gerrit Rössler, representing Berlin Partner Business and Technology. We are a public-private partnership organization in the state of Berlin, and our task is to support and help and to stimulate economic growth in the region. So we have very special interest in helping startups and startup initiatives, making collaborations, finding the structures and the needs they have to grow their business here in Berlin. We're also a founding member of INAM, very early days, and very happy that and very proud also to see development of the network, and we're very happy to continue in the future. Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. And those two members that cannot be here is Professor Emilis Kartoffel, Director of the IRIS, Integrated Research Institute of the Sciences in Adlershof, and Maria Sano, partner at the ECBF, that's the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund, i.e. a VC that invests in deep tech hardware. So I think with this board, we have a super composition of all the stakeholders that INAM represents, and a lot of expertise, which we as the operating team can leverage and tap into. So thank you guys for all your work that you will be doing in advance. And I'm personally looking very much forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much. Now we're coming to a topic which is on the strategic agenda of INAM over the next 1.5 to 2 years, and that is supply chains. Supply chains have been discussed about many times, at least since Corona, also increasingly since the energy crisis, etc. From that perspective, but also with a view to new regulations such as ESG, etc. We're going to hear now 2 keynotes that address the topic with a view to the possibilities that materials, particularly advanced materials, can contribute to helping supply chains become more secure and sustainable. And I'm very pleased to have on stage as our first keynote speaker Professor Schröder. Welcome. He is director of the Leibniz Institute of the for Crystal Growth in Berlin. But not only that, he's on top of that initiated an initiative within the Leibniz Institute that is talking about technological sovereignty. And I think you're also speaker of the Forschungsverbund Berlin, which is kind of an association speaking for the research organization within Berlin. But without further much ado, I think you will comment upon that. I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. Schröder, my name. Yeah, many jobs to do. And yeah, so when Oliver asked me to make the introductory talk here, I coined a slogan, "Materials matter." So Oliver gave me $20 to coin that slogan. But actually, it's a title of an essay set up by architects. Rauer and Uber was the name. What's the fragility of supply chains when it comes to construction work? I think for this meeting today, we should adjust that slogan, namely, secure, sustainable materials matter. I would like to give you 2 arguments in my small talk. Why this is, first of all, secure and sustainable materials are important to build up a resilient society. And here is the point of technology sovereignty moves in. The second argument will be secure and sustainable materials are important for the future of globalization, much more than in the past. And here a new field is set up by the economist, is called the geopolitics of things. Geopolitik der Dinge. Okay, let me outline the first argument. The first argument, secure and sustainable materials are important for building up a resilient society. Certainly, as we all know, the world is getting ready. Cost $10 billion on this planet. It's definitely a stress for the planet. Climate crisis, biodiversity crisis is coming along, and it's absolutely clear there's a political will to resilient society. Resilient society which is able to absorb the shock waves whenever it comes to situations. Also, it is important to treat each other harsh way, but according to our democratic values. Without doubt, there will be an American way, an Asian, Chinese way. The question is, will there also be a European? Enthusiastic European. So I definitely believe there should be a European way based on values. This is the guideline along that serenity. You might find a lot of papers, I think very good set up years ago by the BVF, dealing with all these key technologies. It can be renewables, drugs, pharmaceutical stuff, communication, digitalization, technology. I think the important point to mention is, what does it mean? It means that Europe wants to be strong on key technologies. It does not mean that we need to be leading, or should imply we have the capability to scale base technology. We need to build it up. I think what is very interesting now is, it's relevant for our community here, forces us much more to take a deep tech view. So certainly any added value chain will break up at its weakest link. So materials, very important, because that's the base in standing. So this is summarized somehow in that slogan, all materials, technologies, all technologies is to control. Do not underestimate that. It's to control accreditation, standardization. It is by accreditation and standardization and harmonization process to set up new products that we can transport our values on a global scale. I believe people's matter, and in particular, things better than in the past, sustainable and secure. The second argument, secure and sustainable materials are important in the future. Globalization is given by the fact that, without doubt, the economists tell us that globalization brings a lot of prosperity, welfare, by the International Division of Labor. Without doubt, Germany, Europe is a clear winner on that. However, I think for too long time, many people agree on that, cost efficiency was the only driving force. It gives us the elucidation by considering supply on a global scale, endless, unlimited. It's definitely not true. The second issue about globalization with cost efficiency as the one and only parameter is innovation, digitalization. It's completely delocalized. Certainly also not true. Now, with moving in that secure and sustainable materials are needed, we have to foster, we have to look into how to assemble our supply chains. And here, the important point is that we build up in this deep tech view our own supply chains according to that. How to do that, how to put that in place, I think I will hand over to Philipp, because he will tell us how to make a better planet out of this kind of boundary conditions.
Thank you. I want to share 3 priorities for sustainability transformation. The first is to align your business ambition with a future-fit economy, and I will describe what that means. The second is to set tangible sustainability targets that are in a position to guide strategic and operational decision-making, including sourcing of materials. And the third is how to align your innovation agenda with your sustainability ambition and targets. Now, if you want to set a truly lasting sustainability ambition, then it's important to distance yourself from today's premise of profit first, only considering legislation that is agreed or expected in the short term. To set a lasting sustainability ambition, it's important to define what a future fit economy could look like. And on an abstract level, a future fit economy is an economy that works within planetary boundaries, serving the needs of all while being profitable for business. Now, when we look and describe today's economy, it underserves billions of people while destroying the only planet we have. So clearly that is not a future fit economy. The two dimensions that we always use when we assess whether a business activity is future fit and whether an ambition is long-term viable is whether it's environmentally safe, operationalized and measured, whether it is within planetary boundaries, and whether it's socially just, operationalized and measured by delivering on the SDGs and other international frameworks. Now, clearly, a given business doesn't need to do all of that. A single business must not save the world, but a single business, if it wants to be aligned with a long-term sustainability ambition, needs to not do any harm in any of these dimensions and at least make one positive contribution, either to regenerate the planet or to be distributive, socially just, contribute to a socially just future. Now, how can you translate this abstract requirement into tangible sustainability targets? First, it's important to agree and describe what is your motivation for tangible sustainability targets. If it is to adhere to today's legislation, such as the European Supply Chain Due Diligence Directive, or the reporting requirement, or other existing legally binding aspirations, then that clearly doesn't take you very far. You could look towards your competition, your capital market requirements, or your customers, or you could look at the expected legislation, for example, to have a climate neutral Germany in 2045. Also, you could look towards science. Then you would see it's not just about climate, but also the other planetary boundary being biodiversity, freshwater, land use, and ocean health, or equally considering social requirements from a science-based perspective, such as minimum wages and existenzsichernder Lohn, whatever that means. Lastly, you could look at because it's right. Last year, for example, I worked intensively with a family business that simply said, we want to do it because sustainability is in our NDA. But the important part here is that you make it tangible, not say your ambition might be very abstract, nature positive, water positive, regenerative. That can guide your vision, but it's not a tangible target that you tell your procurement people to buy safe and secure materials. For that, you must have tangible metrics and operationalize them for specific functions, such as procurement, minus 10% water for X, plus 10% something for another material or benefit. Lastly, how can you align your long-term ambition and your tangible sustainability target with your innovate funnel? And this clearly addresses a more large that a startup has a very strong process. Thank you. So the first approach suggested here is that you are inspired by your long-term vision, be that nature positive products, be that water positive or regenerative. And especially if you want to go and venture into entirely new areas, look at the SDGs, look at social requirements, look at the Green Directive, to be inspired entirely new businesses. But equally important, it is to have your operationalized, tangible, sustainable metrics along the innovation funnel so that you can use specific metrics such as the amount of water used per ton of material, the emissions caused in tons by material, either in the innovation first gate, second gate, or third gate when you go to scale up. And if you translate that in specific metrics and guidance, this from a structure process perspective is a sure way to align your products with where you want to be in future. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much. I remain on stage, Philipp, and have a seat, as well as Thomas. And I'd like to call on stage now our two further panelists with who we will discuss this very matter. And first and foremost, Johanna Bahre of Traceless Materials. There you are. And Martin Bahre from the Technical University of Berlin, or more precisely, Chemical Invention Factory. So we don't have a shower, we're running out, so I have to sit here and we have to make with one mic. It's a bit difficult, but anyways, kicking it off. Johanna, sustainable and secure supply chains with traceless materials. What does that mean? And tell us also a bit about yourself.
Well, very quickly about myself, Johanna Bahre, COO and co-founder of Traceless Materials. We were actually part of the ATMACOM in 2020. This is how we came to be part of INAM and the INAM Network. Now, myself, I am responsible for the business activities with Traceless. Of course, supply chain is a big part of that. And what we do at Traceless is that we produce a novel advanced material, an alternative, a holistically sustainable alternative to plastic. So a thermoplast that can be further processed like conventional plastics and bioplastics by the plastic converting industry, but that is holistically sustainable and, among other things, compostable under natural composting conditions, so that if it ends up in the environment, it completely composts there, leaving no trace.
Super cool, thanks. Yeah, I feel like this is a little bit like family. So many, you know, I don't tell you anything about innovation because you know that, right? About myself, I mean, great what you're doing. So about myself, I'm a purpose-driven personality, I'd say. And my purpose is the way towards sustainability. Because let's face it, we are not at all sustainable. And I do that in my private life. I'm the president of an NGO who brings back an extinct species. Yeah, so it's extinct, so not sustainable at all. And we try to make it happen that it's there, sustainable. And the path towards that, that's my purpose, right? And that will take us another 20 years. We were already doing it since 24 years. It's the Atlantic salmon. We're trying to bring it back since 24 years. And it will take us another 20 years. Yeah, so very long and stressful path. And I have the same mission in my professional life. I used to be a founder. I spun out from university and I'm now back to university. And I'm leading the Chemical Invention Factory. I'm also coordinating Green Chem consortia from all the 3 universities and altogether 29 partners. We have one idea of bringing an innovation system, ecosystem of innovation in green chemistry, because the chemical industry, our 3rd biggest industry, is not sustainable at all. 87% are based on fossil resources. And if we want to change that, it will take us longer than 20 years, I tell you. And so we need 2 things. You touched it. We need science, and we have that in Berlin. We are brilliant. We have the cluster of excellence in catalysis, right? But we don't do anything about it. We publish. That will not heal, right? And no app in the world will save the planet alone. Not only chemistry will save it, right? But chemistry must play a role. And that's exactly one thing. And the second thing is, I strongly believe that big corporations, they have the power, but they also have the barriers. They have all their history, which is why they cannot change so easily. This is why we need the small, you're not small anymore, but the small entities
that paved the way, and that what we at Chemical Invention Factory and Green can do. We support teams, we support young scientists, give them the infrastructure, but also invite the corporates to learn and to experiment, because that's what we need. We need two things: hard work and innovation, and that's basically what comes together in Berlin.
Thank you very much. I think the other two panelists, yes, that deserves an applause. The other two panelists we've already known. I would then jump into, with view to time, into my first question. We see that lots of great things are happening, both on the product level and the pre-product level. Maybe Thomas, you were touching upon it already a bit. How do you think we can basically push these initiatives whilst at the same time staying economically competitive? Because particularly looking at the chemical industry, we see that they're moving away from Germany, partly because energy prices are very expensive, partly because the shareholders decide to do so. In the case of Linde, not strictly speaking chemical industry, but gases anyways. What's your take on that? How can we balance that in a way?
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. Yeah, certainly. No, this will be a long transformation process. So I'm not so much in chemical industry nowadays. Also, I studied chemistry once upon a time. Today, much more in optoelectronics. So when you all love your cell phone in your pockets, no, there's silicon in it. There's optoelectronics in it, gallium arsenide. There are two big companies in Germany, Wacker, Burghausen, the third biggest one on silicon wafer stuff. And there's the second biggest in Freiberg that do the gallium arsenide and indium phosphide stuff. No? And this progress in human history, in technology, was always connected with the temperature you achieve. So just to give you a clue, in the gallium arsenide sector, we are about 800 degrees Celsius. In the silicon, we are about 1,400 degrees Celsius. And now people talk about nitrides. We are about 2,100 degrees Celsius, what we control in processes. No? So this in itself is not sustainable. No? But these are the lucky ones. I think this kind of materials on which technologies are based nowadays, no? An incredible success in changing our life. This cannot be replaced easily by any other materials because billions of dollars were invested over the last 70 years. So I think we have to stay on to keep these economies running, but certainly we have to find ways to supply that energy in order to give it, hopefully completely, but this will be difficult, to give it a better green print on that. And here in Berlin, we have the problem, certainly we have not enough surfaces to place all our photovoltaics. So photovoltaics is inefficient by a factor of 10 with respect to available areas to supply this kind of industries. So windmills are another technology which we need, only by the mixture. This is I would like to hand over again to Oliver. So my statement is the materials we are using today are extremely successful on a commercial way, which are extremely successful to change our daily life. In no way they are sustainable.
We have one of the extinct species is back. The second mic is alive again. Martin's influence came to fruition immediately. I wanted to relate to Philipp, because you're thinking a lot about transition processes, etc., etc. How do you see this process? And we know particularly the hardware industry has long investment cycles. There's lots of very expensive equipment in place. There's lots of very expensive products and input materials to be sourced. How do you think one can move ahead and move towards a more green, let's say, but also secure delivery of goods?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think the good news for anyone in startups is we need tremendous disruption to achieve the sustainability goals that we've set. And the sustainability goals are really backed up by legislation, certainly in Europe, also in the US. And so, you know, if we look at the last 50 years, how little has happened, I think clearly now we're on a pathway that a lot more and dramatic shifts will happen because they have to, but also because legally they are increasingly required. Now, I think the big conundrum for business, of course, is how to deliver this crazy ambition profitably, and that's really hard. And to my mind, it always, I find this framework from digitization really helpful about explore and exploit, right? So you exploit and milk to some extent commercially your existing business, while you really explore entirely new disruptive ideas that are dramatically different on an entirely different scale of sustainability and efficiency, but commercially may not yet be available.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that with the hardware world, it's because of the reasons that I've outlined already, it's difficult to make comparison with the digital world. And at least in terms of timeframes of transition, right? I mean, typewriter can be replaced very rapidly by, I mean, back then it took also some 30, 40 years for the personal computer to arrive in everybody's office. But these days, when we look at process digitalization outside the public sector, it can be very, very rapid. But looking to an area which is really prevalent, in which you, Johanna, try to address packaging, anything that's plastics these days. What is your hope you would get to, and what are the roadblocks perhaps on the way to get Traceless to the new leader in the packaging industry, let's say, or let's say at least supplier to the packaging industry? Maybe you take the mic from Thomas.
So I think, first of all, I would like to talk about opportunities, right? And I think what you mentioned earlier, Philip, is absolutely true. We have the big advantage that we did start immediately thinking about the sustainability within our business, but also within our supply chains from the get-go. And I think that in a way makes it much easier for us, because we do not have to now retroactively fit a business model, an entirely functioning business, to sustainability requirements. On the other hand, it also puts additional stress and difficulties in our way. There you have your roadblocks. And definitely another roadblock for us as a hardware startup is always capital, right? And we've heard about that earlier here today as well already, that getting the finance to build up brick, mortar, and steel production plants is definitely something that in the VC world is not very common yet. Interestingly, there are some VCs now specializing into these areas, and I think that is super, super necessary to obtain exactly the changes that you were talking about. But still, many back off from that still. And there we come again to the comparison to the digital world, where it is much easier and much quicker to realize gains as well, right? And so that is for many VCs where their classical structure and setup a more attractive investment so far. But I do agree, we need to go to materials. We need material solutions, things that we can touch, because that is only what is going to help us be sustainable.
Martin, you see a lot of bright minds that do research and research on things that relate to chemistry at the Chemical Invention Factory and beyond, of course. You also looking at or sort of heading the tech transfer to, right? So you see all these ideas. Where would you see? Where do you see promising ideas that actually made it from uni to the market, or maybe even from uni to unicorn, although that's a difficult thing in the hardware world?
So it's not a specific area in chemistry. If you look at the UNIDO, which gives you very good examples of green chemistry, it's applicable to 16 different industries. And so I went through all the different technologies and teams. We have a chemical invention factory, and in Berlin, and it's really not a cluster. You go from so many different applications, so many different markets. It's and that's also the challenge, right? To have an ecosystem that gives the support for specific markets. So I wouldn't pinpoint, but the most promising thing I see is basically Berlin and the bright minds. So when I talk to students, there's no one in doubt of sustainability. Everyone, this is like a no-brainer. This is not you cannot bargain with it, right? So they're really looking into it. They pose the right questions. There's lots of drive, but nevertheless, still the attitude of, you know, when you're a student, you go usually in chemistry, it's 80%, you go to PhD, then you enter a world of publication, of scientific deep findings, and entrepreneurship is like real life. It's really dirty. It's really, you know that. So it's really, you have to do, right? It's do, and changing that mind needs like ecosystem like INAM in Berlin in particular, in general, and this for me is like, you know, the way forward. And I'm really excited for the times to come, because everyone here in this room at least, and so spread the news. It's not the app that will heal the world. It is materials like traceless. It will be more than that. And there will be much more things to come, and getting not only investors ready for it, but also from the public side, you know, regulations. When we're dealing with REACH, and I think it's a good thing. But it's
with REACH, you mean the European regulation?
Exactly, the regulation. We cannot just say, it's sustainable, let's put it on the market. Yeah, we have to regulate it. But when we have a new material, we need fast tracks. We need things to bring faster to market, and let's not put this another barrier for material startups. Because if you have a big corporation, they have their processes for filing a new material for REACH. It goes like this. But a startup, it's for 1 year going through all the regulations, understanding what, and hiring coaches that explain it to you for 5,000 euro a week. Where does the money come from? It's not feasible. So we have to find a balance. Politics must play a role. And the same for me applies to sustainability assessments. If you design it from the beginning as being sustainable, but you then have to make a feasibility study, and calculate it, that costs you a PhD for 1 year. And there we need smart approaches, fundings from governments to support it, fast tracks, and any idea here also.
Super, thank you. With a view to time, I'd like to close the panel with the last round, and maybe each one of you can tell me about the next big thing in their respective area, starting with.
The next big thing is a regenerative sock that I'm co-creating with one of my startups where I'm an angel investor. Now that may sound a little funny, but I think it illustrates how we've done it. Is maybe interesting that, you know, sustainability is not about incremental gains compared to yesterday's product or your competition. True sustainability is anchored in a vision of the future in science, and then translates that into product specifications.
Okay, yeah, next big thing in our community, UV technologies. So I'm very fascinated by the idea bring up UV technologies which can disinfect water. So nowadays in any developed country, water works, we have huge mercury lamps sitting on one wall and to disinfect all the water in that basin. But now imagine there's a catastrophe happening, like an earthquake. How do you disinfect the water to avoid diseases like cholera and all this pandemic stuff? And if you could make UV LEDs, like we have it already in the solid state lighting market for visible light, I think that would be a big game changer to save a lot of human lives. That's what we are working on.
Well, I hope, and I think that the next big thing in the plastics industry is hopefully going to be biomaterials. So not just incrementally a little more sustainable versions of plastic, basically, but really novelly thought from the get-go, sustainable things that have all the impact indicators in mind. So not just, for example, compostability, but also the other boundaries that we have.
it's really tough to pick. So I wouldn't pick a technology. All of you said I have an example, and it would be unfair to the others. So for me, the next big thing is basically Berlin with its positive attitude, because it's not only the way we produce, what we produce and how we use it, but it's also the way how we interact and how we treat each other. This is the key to make unfolding innovation, and I think it's the best place to be.
Look, it's not bad either.
Very true.
Thank you very much. And before we now move on, now you can take your seats again. We move on to some more bright minds that we have in the network. And we are coming to some startups from our ecosystem. And I have on my list first, Quantum Grade Materials. David.
Yeah, good evening. I'm David Übel from Quantum Grade Materials, and we are a startup to be funded. Okay, yeah, Quantum Grade Materials, that's our name. We want to supply the logistics and the materials needed for quantum computing and other future technologies. And that's fine. Okay, then I want to say that I really like the notion of many panelists and speakers today, that material producing companies need a lot more than startups in the digital realm. It's something we are experiencing for the last year working on this topic, that it is brick, mortar and steel, and it was set, and you're fighting much longer investment times and also much deeper regulations. It's coming on, okay. Okay, as you might know, quantum computing is a big topic which is maybe up there with space exploration and AI from the next big future topics. And there are several approaches fighting for the top spot. The most common one are superconducting qubits, which have already reached a level of maturity, but there are also other approaches. There's one specific one called spin-based, which needs a It's very tempting, always it blinks.
Yeah, apologies for this.
That's fine.
That's the downturn of being the first.
Spin-based quantum computers use isotope pure semiconductors, especially silicon-28, and possibly in the next step, isotope enriched germanium. And for chip manufacturers, you can't just use this as a general materials, but you need a specific gas called silane. So silicon with 4 hydrogen atoms. And this is not available, neither for research nor for industry. What is available is its precursor, isotope enriched silicon fluoride. And silicon fluoride is the gas in which you do the enrichment in. The researching environment, which would like to use isotope enriched silane, is lacking that material, especially in the Western world. Thank you.
So digital is not always the best solution.
Okay, let's do the quantum computers. On the top left, just as an idea, those are the superconductors And this is the approach we want to supply. And those are some other also very important approaches. The pitch I always give for the spin-based quantum computers is the scale. If you look at any other approach, you're in the millimeter scale. There's a millimeter, there are two. And the only one which goes really small is the spin-based approach. You can see here, well below a micrometer, the only one which can really use the scale of modern chip manufacturing below 100 nanometers. And if you compare that for other approaches like trapped ions, for a universal quantum computer, you would need an entire hallway, which is cooled down to basically the minimum temperature and also under super high vacuum conditions. In the case of quantum dots, it's a regular chip. It's computer sized. Okay, what we want to do is quite simple. We want to buy isotope enriched silicon tetrafluoride and convert it into enriched silane 28SEH4. And we have a process patent pending which can do that in a much quicker way than any comparable process which has been used in the past. And then we want to do customization to the customer's requirement and sell this customized isotope enriched material. That's what we call quantum grade material. To give you a scale, the market price or the ask price, which has been set before, is up to $1 million per kilogram. It's 10 times the price of pure gold. So with a small production, which produces 5 kilograms per year, you can already run a small sustainable company. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thanks again for the pickups there. Thank you. Next one up is Eucaneo Biotech. Both of these startups have been or are in our AtmaLab incubation program, by the way. And there I see Florian. If you could give the mic to Florian from Eucaneo. Welcome on stage.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Oh, it's loud. Okay. Thank you so much for having us here today, especially to INAM again and AtmaLab. My name is Florian, co-founder and CEO of Eucaneo. What we develop is actually a solution to remove CO2 from ambient air. We had a lot about sustainability today. But you know, the problem is it's actually not enough to only reduce the emissions we have. We actually have to capture billions of tons directly from the air. In fact, 10 gigatons by 2050. To do that, okay, no. To read, yeah, this is not easy today. To do that is really, really tricky because actually the CO2 concentration in the air is really, really low. It's only like 400 ppm, and that requires you a lot of energy. What we believe over evolution, biological processes developed, which just got optimized to actually remove CO2 from the air. What we do is we harness these processes by basically isolating enzymes and then really using them on membranes to develop the world's first biomimetic direct air capture technology. Imagine it's basically container-sized units, which you can place just anywhere, and you just filter CO2 out of the air. And in the end, as an end product, you have CO2 concentrated gas. It's basically like 35,000 trees on 15 square meters. Sounds a lot? It is really a lot. Yeah, 400 up to 940 tons of CO2 per unit. What we can do with the CO2 is just only like we restore the healthy balance of these atmospheres, but you can really use it to reduce synthetic, for example, like carbon neutral products, like synthetic fuels. But you can also use it to store long-term underground to issue carbon credits. We as a team, we're here based in Berlin. We're currently 6 people and really combine the scientific and startup experience. We have research experience combined like with more than 20 years, especially in material science, enzyme engineering, and like biophysics, but also have leading startup experience from companies like McKinsey, and a lot of like a broad network. We've already filed our patents. We had some very promising results in the lab, but now we're developing new kind of membranes to really make this industrial scalable. The goal of this year is building really like this new kind of membranes, new prototypes. And for this, we're really looking actually for development partners. So anyone who's here really interested in biomimetic membranes, who's working on like new polymer structures combined with enzymes, please reach out to us. But we're also looking for new material scientists to join our team. Thank you very much.
Florian, biomimetic, that's a buzzword also for our friends from Mimotype, who are up next.
Mic check, mic check. Okay, right. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. INAM is great. So, say that up front. We are Mimotype, and I have a question for you. So, who's the silent killer? What's the name of the silent killer that is killing our ecosphere? It's actually ALAN, and that's short for artificial light at night. So, light pollution really isn't only a problem for astronomers. Cannot see the night sky anymore. It has deep implications affecting our ecosphere. So just to give you a couple of examples, near coastal areas, artificial light is desynchronizing the spawning behavior of corals, impacting coral reef growth. Migrating birds are distracted by artificial light. Humans are distracted by artificial light. So the list goes on and on and on. The point being that today's lighting technologies are toxic. So not only from the kind of light that we actually interact with, but also the material basis of these light sources. So LEDs rely on pollutive heavy metals. OLED technology relies on extractive rare earth metals. So we see really 4 areas where we want to improve lighting. That is the environmental impact of materials, the light quality, supply chain, so not being dependent on China, Russia, or even the US for that matter, and also disposal. So we see huge unaddressed electronics waste streams coming from current lighting sources. And at Mimotype, we looked deeply at nature, specifically at jellyfish. So most of you, I think, have seen what is known as the green fluorescent protein, which has a really interesting luminescent core. And we've been reverse engineering that luminescent core so that we can now produce at scale using green chemistry methods, structural mimics of these proteins that can function as low-cost emitters and color-converting materials, phosphors, for photobiologically safe OLED applications. So at Mimotype, we are really solving toxic light. We're addressing all of the important areas that I just addressed. Our emitters are easily color tunable. They are biocompatible. They are deployable as a drop-in solution into current OLED stacks. So this is just 3 of the actual USPs that you can see here. So in terms of traction, we raised 700,000 euros an angel round. We are working at Iris. So thank you, Tom. He even built some of our OLEDs. And we really see us as first mover in biosolutions for the lighting and electronics markets. And with that, I want to close. Just this is the future. So we are moving away from the really solid state lighting applications that we are seeing today, like LEDs or OLED, static displays and screens, but really bio-based hydrogels, flexible wetware that we can use in conjunction with electroluminescent materials, as you can see here, and that come from nature and that can go to nature as well. So thank you, and exciting times. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you very much, Claudio. And the final now is Cambrium. Wonderful. Give a hand to very much.
So thank you very much, INAM, for having me here today. Really love the vision of this community and where we're going to go together. I'm Charlie. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of Cambrium. So we're on a mission to make materials that matter. And we can start with why we set out for this vision. The existing material paradigm is unsustainable. So I'm just highlighting here that 23% of GHG emissions come from material production in a broad sense. That's only one of the many things wrong with this picture. You can choose your favorite subset of problems. Where does biology go for solutions? To proteins. So proteins are not the total component of many of these solutions. They are often the organizing component of these solutions. Structural proteins take bulk materials in nature and organize them into elaborate shapes, which give them incredible material performance. So at Cambrium, we decided to program proteins, and I can see Monica in the audience here with me today, to address some of these existing problems in our industrial manufacturing chain. And I think that second point there, to make sure that we're developing proteins that can actually drop into existing manufacturing solutions, is critical to the way that we think as a company. We are taking an engineering approach to this set of problems. And this is, embedded in our company philosophy. So you can see the primary sequence of proteins as having 20 primitives. So these amino acids which code all of their function. We then debug this in our computational pipeline. So we're out of an AI company builder. And many of you will have seen in the big news recently, a lot of basically protein debugging tools coming out. And finally, we run that code using synthetic biology. So these are usually yeast or secreting organisms that can produce protein at high titers, meeting reasonable prices down the line. For the record, if we want to talk about a European advantage, we use a technology for scale known as precision fermentation today. And here, Europeans are ahead of the game. Americans come here to scale. So we want to keep our eye on attractive economics. We've got some areas to focus. The markets we look to innovate in are in cosmetics, fashion, and packaging. These are often industries where there is a strong ambition to move fast. Consumers have high desire, and the supply chains relevant for those different use cases have ins for go-to-markets. And we are a startup, and this is incredibly important to focus carefully on which markets we can play in. So we have our launch in, I guess, under 4 weeks now. I'll be going to Barcelona with product made in this way. It's a human identical collagen for vegan and cruelty-free skincare. And we're so proud to present that on the public stage. So this is my favorite slide. This is the team. This is our lab here in Berlin-Buch. One of them, Monica, who you can find after this presentation, is building out the material lab where we show our prototypes for further use cases. And here's the fantastic team that's made it possible to date. Happy to go into detail about anyone and their background when we talk later this evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlie. Okay, those were just as the wrong word here, but these were 4 glimpses at what startups in the INAM ecosystem do, and I think each one of them is really impressive in what they address and what they do and in which direction they're heading. There's one slide that keeps you from food for thought and drinks and food for the stomach, and this is our annual plan of big events. We do loads and loads of small events for the membership, for the ecosystem, et cetera, but these are the big events. We're here at the moment. So actually tomorrow, we're heading off to Japan to tap into ecosystems over there and make connections. We take some startups from Berlin with us and bring hopefully back also startups and investors. Then later on, we're going to Singapore, and these two trips are basically financed courtesy of the Berlin Senate under the umbrella of the Programm für Internationalisierung. So this should be mentioned. And again, in Singapore, we do the same thing. We're looking at the ecosystems. We're trying to find startups that fit into our ecosystem that might want to tap into the German market, And of course, also talk to investors and others that find our ecosystem of relevance, but at the same time establishing links to organizations and soft landing platforms that help startups from Berlin to basically launch them in Asia. Further down the line, Chris has mentioned it already, we have the demo day, ATMACOM demo day on the 25th of May at TU 1. Starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We have a super pitch day in June where our ATMA Lab startups, which have then all completed the program, will be pitching, and we combine this with our Deep Tech Investors Lounge, which is an investors-only event where startups from seed to pre-Series A pitch, or Series A also. So that's going to be a long day of pitches and meeting interesting startups, investors, and everybody who's interested in that. In August, we may have an event which I cannot reveal as yet. We're still, let's say, under negotiations, but stay tuned and keep an eye on what's coming up. Moving into September, we hope to be getting on board the next cohort of ATMA Lab. That is depending on whether we'll get a new round of funding from Berlin Senate to continue the program. And later on that month, we have an international conference, congress, you name it, focusing on the future of computing from a materials perspective. So we'll be looking at quantum computing, of course, but also new approaches to new materials and new approaches to current chip technologies, i.e. semiconductors. At the end, or in October, we have our ATMACOM Scale program, culminating in the demo day on the 26th. We have another Deep Tech Investors Lounge. We do 2 of these per year at the end of November, and then we conclude the year with an end-of-year party. And with that, I would also like to conclude. I would like to thank everybody who presented, participated on stage today, the INAM board, the panelists, startups. Thank you so much. And I would like to invite you yet now for, as I said before, some food and drinks upstairs at the bar. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy your time here and see you soon.